Shavua Tov, Gedvach. We are on the bottom of Vav Amud Aleph. Here we go. So, Tana Rabbanan. We're going to go back a few lines. We did this already yesterday, but Tana Rabbanan is Tana Brisa. Ketim Arvin Derech Rishus Rabim. How do you adjust a street that is a Rishus Rabim? Okay, so Osa Tzuras Pesach Mikan. You make a form of a doorway. So what the Gemara is asking me here is, let's say you have Rishus Rabim, a full-fledged public domain. So public domain is at least 16 amos wide, quite wide. Okay, and there's a discussion which we'll get into in more detail later about 600,000 people having to walk through it every day. Bottom line is, it's a full-fledged public street, and the Gemara is asking, how do you adjust it? How do you set it up in a way that enables a person to carry on such a street? So the Gemara says, we're going to see there's three opinions, okay? Osa Tzuras Pesach Mikan. You make a doorway, the form of a doorway, meaning a top and two sides on one side of the street. Ulechi Mikora Mikan, or a lechi, or a korah. Lechi is the thing on the side, korah is the thing on the top, krasp in the top, on the other side. Chanani Omer, Chanani disagrees. He says no. Here he gives two opinions. He says, Beishame Omrim Osa Delas Mikan. You have to make a door on one side of the street, Videlas Mikan, and a door on the other side of the street. No, well, when you go in or out of the street, you have to close the door behind you. In other words, the door has to be closed at all times. Or, as soon as a person walks through it. Beis Hillel Omrim, Osadelis Mikan, you make a door on one side, Ulech Mikor Mikan, and a Lechi and a Korah on the other side. Now it's interesting, Beis Hillel does not clarify when he says you only make one door. Is he arguing on Beis Shammai in one point? Beis Shammai said two doors, he says one door, but he agrees to Beis Shammai that the doors have to be closed, the door has to be closed, or is he saying that you make one door, the door can even be open? That Gemara is going to discuss that question shortly. Okay, so the Gemara first asks, if it's a full-fledged public domain, are you able to actually make an Eruv? Yes, okay, and Amar Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda taught the following in Brisa. Misha, how you like? We're in the base medrash, in the chapel, in that there. Misha Hayulo Shnei Batim, excuse me. A person who has two houses, Mishnei Tzdi Rishus Rabim, on two sides of the public domain. Okay, meaning, let's say you have a house over here and a house over here, and you have a street in the middle. Osa lechi mikan, lechi mikan. You make a lechi, on one side, lechi mikan, and lechi on the other side of the house. Or korah mikan, v'korah mikan. Or you make a crossbeam on one side of the house, a korah mikan, and a crossbeam on the other side of the house. V'nosim emta, and you're allowed to carry between the two houses. So imagine you have two houses, you have a public street over here, and you own two houses. One house you have your food, and one house you have your dining room table. So you want to be able to carry things in between. So what do? You make a lechi on each side of the house, or a korah on each side of the house, and then you could carry across the street. And the Gemara says, the Rabbanan say to him, Amrulo, the Chacham say to him, Ein Arvim Rishus Rabim B'kach. You're not allowed to make a Rishus Rabim. You're not allowed to adjust a Rishus Rabim like this. You're not allowed to do so. So you see very clearly from this brisa that you cannot adjust a Rishus Rabim. When something is a public domain, no matter how many lechis or korahs you put up, it seems like they're saying you can't do any carrying whatsoever. You can't. A lechi and korah is not going to override the rules of Rishus Rabim. So the Gemara now first anticipates a possible answer. B'chitim, and maybe you'll say B'kachud lo ma'arva. Maybe they're only disagreeing with Rabbi Yehuda in the sense that he said you could enable carrying by putting a lechi and a korah, but maybe b'delasos me'arva. But he would agree, Rabbi Yehuda but the Chum would agree that if you put a door on one side, like Beis Hillel said, then maybe it works. The Gemara says that can't be. Why? Because we have Amoraim, which tell us explicitly this can't be done. Va'amar Rabba bar Rechana Amar Rav Yochanan, Yerushalayim, the city of Jerusalem, Ilmale dal Susan and Elas Belala, were Yerushalayim's doors not closed at night? Chayavan lemishim Rishus Rabim. It would be a full-fledged Rishus Rabim. V'amar Ula, and Ula says we are in the chapel, the base medrash. Okay, V'amar Ula, and Ula said, Hani abule de these the avenues which have gates and the choza around it, would not be at the doors being closed. You'd be liable for carrying Rishus Rabim. So you see that unless there are actual doors on each side, full-fledged doors on each side, it would be considered a full-fledged Rishus Rabim. Nothing could prevent that. So what's coming out over here is the Chachamim's position is that unless you have doors walling it in, unless it's fully walled in by walls and doors, otherwise it's a Rishus Rabim, and simply putting up a korah, even a door on one side, that would not be enough. You didn't have doors on both sides in order to make it override Rishus Rabim, but anything less than that wouldn't work. So again, what does this brisa mean? Because now we're seeing everyone's telling us that if something is a full-fledged public domain, you could put up everything you want, but unless you have two full-fledged doors on each side, you can't override it, and you would not be able to carry there. So Gemara says, you know what? You're right. We misunderstood this brisa. Rather, Amar Yehuda Hachiyama. This is what the brisa meant. How do you adjust a mavoi? Again, this alleyway, the street that is open to two Rishus Rabim, to two public domains on each side. So again, imagine, for those of you living in Baltimore, imagine Shelleydale was a mavoi, it's an alleyway, right? And then on Green Spring, let's pretend is Rishus Rabim, and Pimlico, let's pretend is Rishus Rabim. So you have the street opening from one to the other. There, what do you do in order to enable you to carry in between? Osa Tzuras Pesach Mikan, you make a opening, a Tzuras Pesach, again, a doorway on one side, Ulechi Korah Mikan, and a Lechi or Korah on the other side. That's the case we're talking about. We're not talking about a full-fledged Rishus Rabim. You cannot override a Rishus Rabim. Rabbi Yehuda has this view. We're not going to talk about Rabbi Yehuda's view right now, but the point is that Chacham say if it's a public domain, there's nothing you could do to make it not a public domain, unless you have like a full full-fledged wall around it with doors closed. But anything less than that, you can't do. So rather, what was the Gemara talking, the Brisa talking about? It was talking about a street that opens on both sides, opens on both ends into public domains. So what do you have to do in order to prevent a person from carrying? What do you have to do in order to allow a person to carry within it? So here it's more stringent, obviously, than what we've been talking about until now. Until now, we've been talking about like cul-de-sacs, where you have a mavoi that closes on one side, but here it's open on both sides, here and here, right? Pimlico, Greenspring, right? Pimlico, Greenspring. Yeah, so it's open on both sides. So there you need to do more. Again, we saw two opinions. One opinion says you do a tzuras HaPesach, a door frame on one side and a lechi and cord on the other side. And then we had machlokes Beis Hillel Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai says a door on each side. Beis Hillel says door on one side and the door, and on the other side a lechi or a kara. Ibai Luligmar asks, L'chananya li Beis Hillel, according to Beis Hillel, tzarech linol in tzarech linol. Do you have to close the door, right? We already foreshadowed this question. According to Beis Hillel, do you have to close the door or not? Tashma, we bring a response. Answer to Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Eino tzarech linol. Rav Yehuda's name is Shmuel. You do not have to close the mavoi door behind you. You do not have to close the mavoi door. Ikeda Amri, another version of this discussion. Amar of Masna b'didi have uvda. There was this personal story which has happened. I was in a place where there was an open mavoi and there was a door on one end and a lechi and cord on the other. Amar Shmuel, ein tzarech linol. You do not have to close the door. Okay. So far, we've seen everyone saying that according to Beis Hillel, you need a door on the other side, but you don't have to close the door. Okay. But now we have another dialogue around this question. They asked Rav Anan, tzarech linol, ein tzarech linol. Do they have to close the door at the end or not? Amar lahu, tachazi hani abuli dinarda. Come and see these gates of the city of Naharda, Ditaiman ad Palgai Ba'afra, which are sunk halfway in the sand, okay, in an open position, right? In other words, they're sunk in the sand. You can't move them, right? The gates can't be closed. They're stuck in the sand. The Ayl V'nafig Mar Shmuel, and Shmuel himself goes in and out of the city. He walks through this area. He knows about these gates. It doesn't stop people from carrying. So you see clearly the doors can be opened. The Gemara says, no. There's no proof from there. Amar Kahana, Hanach Migufos Havai. They're partially closed. So we've been asking, does Beis Hillel say does Beis Hillel say they have to be closed, or can they be open? And so you can't bring a proof from Naharda, because there, maybe it's true it doesn't have to be fully closed, but maybe as long as it's partially closed, it would be allowed. But if it's fully open, maybe that would not be enough. So we don't have an answer. Kiasar of Nachman came. Amar Panyuha Lafrai. Rav Nachman said, clear the sand away. Okay, so the Gemara wants to make an inference. Why is he saying to move the sand away? Clearly holds you have to close the door. Gemara says no. Lo. As long as they are fit to close. Okay, even if they're not closed, it still might be sufficient. So again, we don't have a real clear-cut proof in this whole case over here as to what the need is. From these gates of Naharda, either not, they're only halfway closed. So from that, we don't know if you need them to be, from there we can't learn, that they could be fully open, because maybe they have to be partially closed in order to be okay. And the other thing is from the factor of Nachman said that you should dig out the sand. All that tells you is that they have to be fit to be closed. We still don't know if they have to be closed. Okay, and that is the end of this discussion. Now we go back to, if you recall, we had a discussion earlier about L-shaped mavois. L-shaped mavois are cases where the mavoi is opposed to being, so there's like three types of mavois. You have a mavoi that is the mavoi that is open on both sides. That's called a mavoi mefulash. Okay, that's the one we just spoke about right now. Then you have a mavoi which is like an L. We spoke about the L one, which is open on both sides, but it's not straight, right? So obviously the travel between them is a little bit more complicated. It's called a mavoi akum. And then you have a mavoi sasam, which is a mavoi which is open on one side but closed on the other side. So here the Gemara is talking about a mavoi akum, like an L-shaped one, but as opposed to the L-shaped one we talked about before, it's two L's, like a U or a ches, okay? Hahu mavoi akum to Bernada. There was a mavoi that was like a ches, okay? In Narda. And they placed the chumras, the stringencies of Rav and the stringencies of Shmuel there. And they require doors by the bend, okay? So again, you have two mavois. Now imagine two L's intersecting, so it's like a ches or a U, and where the wall, so it's open. You have an opening, and if you're following the opening, you're following this U. So the top of the U is open to the Rishus Rabbim. You go. It's just as you're about to turn to the left, right? There's doors over there, okay? And then you go, and then you start turning again to the left. There's doors over there, and then you go back down into the street. So, by the two street sides, you have lechis at each side, but where the turns in each side, where the L starts to curve to the L, the left and the second left, there are doors over there. Okay, so we have the chumras of both Rav and Shmuel. But they require doors. We'll see what this means. Chumer de Rav. What do you mean the stringencies of Rav? Damar teraso kimefulash. Remember, Rav said earlier yesterday that when you have an L-shaped mavoi, when it's a mavoi that is not, when it's open on both sides, but it's not straight, it turns. in such a case, we treat that as if it's wide open, okay? So therefore, you're going to need to treat it like a wide open mavui. But if that's the case, if we're passing like Rav, Amar Rav, we saw Rav saying today, halacha Tanakama. The halacha follows a Tanakama who holds in an open mavui, even if it's open on both sides, it needs a tzuras Pesach, a door frame on one side, and a lechi and a korah on the other side. Okay, so it doesn't need a door. Okay, so the Gemara asks, why do we need a door? So the Gemara answers, Shmuel, because Shmuel said when you have a mavi mefulash, when you have a wide open mavui, then you need a doorway on one side. But the Gemara asks, Damar of Kishmuel, Damar halacha kichananya. It goes like Shmuel said, the halacha is like Chananya. From Shmuel to Rasuk of Sasum. But we saw yesterday that Shmuel said that when you have a mavui that is like an L shape, then we treat that like it's closed off. So the Gemara says, as Karav, in that respect, we go like Rav. Right? Damar Terasik Mefulash, who says that a L-shaped or a curved type of mavui, it's like an open one. So basically, we're seeing over here, we're taking the stringencies of Rav and the stringencies of Shmuel. The Gemara asks, do you really fall? Are you allowed to follow two stringencies? But Tanya was taught in a brisa, La'olam halacha ki Beis Hillel. The halacha always follows the view of Beis Hillel as opposed to that of Beis Shammai. Then the brisa goes on and says something which doesn't seem to make sense based on the first line. If you want to do like Beis Shammai, go ahead. If you want to do like Beis Hillel, go ahead. Mikuli Beis Shammai, Mikuli Beis Hillel. One who adopts the leniencies of Beis Shammai, the leniencies of Beis Hillel, Russia, they are wicked. If you want to take the stringencies of Beis Shammai and the stringencies of Beis Hillel, the fool goes in the darkness. In other words, you can't take the leniencies of both. That's just wrong. You can't do the stringencies of both. That's just dumb. Why would you do that? It doesn't make any sense. Ella, rather, if you want to go like Beis Shammai, you have to go consistently both the stringencies and the leniencies. Like Beis Hillel, the same thing. He says the Gemara, Hagufa Kasha. This brisa, there's a question within this brisa itself. Why? Amr olam halacha ki Beis Hillel. First, you said the halacha is like Beis Hillel. V'hadar amr. Next line, you said what's the last thing to Beis Shammai ose. If you want to do like Beis Shammai, you're allowed to do. So which one is it? The opening line says you have to go like Beis Hillel. The next line says if you want to go like Beis Shammai, you could. That doesn't make sense. So Gemara says lo kasha, no contradiction. Kan kodem baskol. The second brisa is referring to before the baskol came out. There apparently we're going to learn soon in the Gemara that there was a long-lasting, years-long machlokas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, and the Chum did not know who to paskin like, who to rule like, until a baskol came out and said we go like Beis Hillel. Now, just to take a step back, why was there this machlokas? Beis Hillel was really the majority, and normally you go like the majority, but everyone knew that Beis Shammai was a much sharper group of people, and therefore the Gemara said they were not sure. It's true we normally go like the majority, but since Beis Shammai is sharper, they're much more brighter. Therefore, maybe we go like them until a baskol came out and says no, we go like Beis Hillel. So the Gemara says that said you're allowed to go like either one. Is Kod and Baskol. Well, they're still arguing back and forth. We didn't know who to rule like. There you could go like either one. Kala Achar Baskol, after the Baskol. That's where the first line of the brisa came about, which said that you have to go like Beis Hillel. That's one answer. People say my answer number two. Hava Hala Achar Baskol. Both of them are after the Baskol. After the Baskol came out. So if that's the case, why doesn't everyone go like Beis Hillel? Rabbi Yeshua, he lo mashkach Baskol. Rabbi Yeshua, based on Gemara and Bava Metzia, which we'll speak about in a second, he holds we don't ever listen to Baskols. What's Rabbi Yeshua? So there's a famous Gemara and Bava Metzia. We had a machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim. And Rabbi Eliezer brought all these divine proofs to say that halacha is like him until he said he asked for there to be a baskol. Baskol, sorry if I didn't define, is a voice ringing out from heaven. He said, let this voice ring out from heaven to prove that I'm right. The baskol comes out and says Rabbi Eliezer is right, and Rabbi Yeshua gets up and says, who cares? Lo bashmaim he, the Torah is not in heaven. We don't listen to that. We go acharayam lahatos. The Torah says we go after the majority, and the Chacham say this is the right thing. Even if a voice from heaven says you're wrong, we go like the Chachamim. Fine, and therefore they disregarded Rabbi Eliezer. So the Gemara over here, what we're saying over here is that both of them are after the baskol. Now, both the first line of the brisa is after the baskol, and the second line is after the baskol. So why? But they're following different views. The first view, which said we go like Beis Hillel, that is like the Chachamim who said the baskol said we go like Beis Hillel. The second view is the view of Rabbi Yeshua, says even though a baskol came out and said we go like Beis Hillel, we never listen to the baskol, and therefore we could disregard it. And therefore, if you want to go like Beis Shammai, you could still go like Beis Shammai. We'll see another answer, and we're still in the middle of a dialogue because we're still in the middle of the question asking why did those in Nahardah go like the chumras, the stringencies of both Rav and Shmuel? Aren't you supposed to pick one or the other? You're not supposed to incorporate both together. That was earlier in the brisa. What the brisa said is you can't go ahead to go and take the chumras of Beis Shammai. That's a foolish thing to do. So why in Nahardah were they doing this seemingly foolish thing? We'll come back to that tomorrow.